On the 14th of August 2023, the U.S. government announced it would be sending an additional $200 million in aid to Ukraine. On the same day, Biden tweeted that people affected by the fires in Hawaii will be offered a one-time payment of $700 per household. This, of course, caused an uproar, so we had to dig deeper to make sense of this madness. We found this chart released by the Council on Foreign Relations that seems to accurately reveal just how much the US, Germany, Great Britain, Canada, and other NATO allied nations have pumped into Ukraine in terms of military, financial, and humanitarian aid since the start of the war up until February this year. By the end of the first 2 years of the war, the amount of money in terms of US aid sent to Ukraine pales in comparison with what Washington gave to other top recipients of military and financial aid between 2020 and 2022, including Israel, $9.9 billion, Afghanistan, $6.8 billion, and Egypt, $4.3 billion. The deadly Lahaina wildfire disaster that swept across parts of Maui on the 8th of August killed at least 97 people. So, how can the same American government that didn't mind shedding over $75 billion in aid to Ukraine announce plans to give those suffering in Maui a one-time $700 payment for each household? And it's not just that the US has been a perpetrator of this madness. Germany is in what's called a technical recession. The UK has seen a recent rise in inflation, and its economy is still suffering from post-pandemic issues. Meanwhile, in the Great White North, Canada is wrestling inflation, a housing crisis, and an opioid crisis. Clearly, NATO and its allies could do with a little of their own generosity. So here's the million-dollar question, or rather, the billion-dollar question. Why would countries knee-deep in international debt and economic crisis be so keen on helping Ukraine? Well, to NATO, the war in Ukraine isn't just a war against Russia. NATO is fighting a bigger enemy, an enemy much bigger than Russia. But to understand NATO's true enemy, we need to understand NATO itself. Now, this might be a good time to hit that subscribe button and give us a thumbs up if you're enjoying the video so far. As World War II ended and the relationship between the Soviet Union and other Allied powers deteriorated, Europe needed a plan for maintaining long-term peace. So Joseph Stalin, the Soviet premier, was given temporary control of Poland and a portion of Germany. However, this decision backfired when it quickly became clear that the Soviet Union had greater ambitions, as it sponsored communist-led coups in Czechoslovakia and surrounding Eastern European territories. Fearful of further Soviet encroachment on Western Europe, these countries discussed forming an organization capable of providing mutual security. The United States, Great Britain, France, Canada, and a group of 8 other European countries organized themselves for a new geopolitical reality. In 1949, they created the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO, an alliance to preserve a free, integrated, and democratic Europe, particularly against the Soviet Union. This is the origin of NATO. The organization has 2 official languages, English and French. That little detail, the 2 official languages, mean much more than you might think. It explains NATO's nature, its true culture and beliefs, what it stands for, where it leans most of the time. For example, currently, NATO has 31 members across Europe and North America, but only 3 of its members, the US, the UK, and France, are nuclear weapon states. This makes them among the most powerful militaries globally. Their ability to develop and manufacture superior military equipment gives NATO a significant edge. The US alone has nearly 800 military bases in more than 70 countries and territories across the globe, enhancing the alliance's control over regional and international geopolitical events. Another thing is the economic strength of these key NATO member countries. It underpins the alliance's financial power. The US dollar, serving as the world's primary reserve currency, gives NATO considerable control in diplomatic and financial negotiations. Additionally, the US holds influence over international financial institutions like the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, enabling it to shape economic policies and extend loans to other countries, thereby exerting influence over their regional dynamics. And if we think about commercial and technological power, NATO members, especially the US, are leaders in producing cutting-edge technologies such as semiconductor chips, fighter jets, and commercial aircraft. Hosting major commercial companies and having access to vast natural resources gives NATO control over the global supply chain. Although Finland, NATO's latest member, who joined in 2023, adds one of Western Europe's most potent militaries to the alliance, theirs and that of many other European countries aren't anywhere equal to the two English-speaking giants and France. Regardless of how big and powerful these three are, the other NATO countries can revel in the knowledge that the alliance promises military support if one member is threatened, a formal commitment known as mutual security. And friends, therein lies the core of NATO's strength, written boldly in Article 5 of its founding treaty, a commitment that an attack on one member country will be considered an attack on the entire alliance. But since the dissolution of the Soviet Union, it looked like NATO had suffered from an identity crisis of sorts. NATO's identity has always revolved around preventing an undesirable world order, whether it was trying to maintain peace and stability in Europe or fighting against the authoritarian Soviet Union. Soon, there will be no one left to fight, because NATO is now the world order. It's expanded across Western Europe and had 3 of the world's 9 nuclear powers in its ranks. In 2019, President Emmanuel Macron of France described NATO as brain dead and questioned the U.S. commitment to the alliance. But since the 24th of February 2022, after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, NATO has been forced into a renaissance. The relevance of such a dominant Western alliance seems to have been redeemed. Yes, they existed as a military coalition, but in today's war climate, you need to have a more nuanced political weaponry, especially when you have to defend allies that are not exactly allies or aren't bound by that Article 5 we spoke about earlier. Ukraine. We're referring to Ukraine. One of these political weapons is sanctions. Now, you may have heard of the SWIFT sanctions, which, to say the least, NATO wields as a very formidable weapon. SWIFT, which stands for the Society of Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication, allows banks to relay information about financial transactions to one another. More than 11,000 financial institutions across over 200 countries and territories use SWIFT. In Russia, SWIFT was used for 70% of transfers, which is why NATO banning Russian banks from SWIFT was such a big deal. The US dollar, cherished as a reserve currency, also bolsters NATO's economic might and global relevance. Most of the world's economies are backed by the dollar. And then you have NATO's military muscle. Its arsenal includes not just conventional weapons, but the ominous nuclear capability. Add to that the vast global influence of the United States, the driving force behind the alliance, and you have a superpower in action. Enter BRICS, the alliance of the rising giants: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Now, they've been hard at work, trying to create a parallel system to challenge NATO's dominance. From plans for a reserve currency to China's aspirations of global superpower status, BRICS is a force to be reckoned with. China in particular is flexing its muscles, both militarily and economically. With a booming manufacturing hub and massive lending power, it's setting its sights on matching the influence of the United States. India boasts the world's largest and youngest population and has recently emerged as a fast-growing economy. It became a major manufacturer of goods and medical supplies and a hub for highly skilled labor, contributing to its ascent as a global power. Before the war, Russia held significant power with a formidable military, dominance in energy production, especially oil, and being a major exporter of food. These factors made Russia a crucial component of BRICS. The collective strengths of these nations posed a serious challenge to NATO. Russia's military power, energy production, and food export capabilities, India's manufacturing, IT, and skilled workforce, and China's debt-trapping practices and advanced manufacturing collectively established BRICS as a parallel power to NATO. Although they've tried to give the final blow to NATO by introducing a new reserve currency to challenge the dominance of the US dollar, most of the BRICS countries are either too dependent or interdependent on the same. But BRICS isn't stopping. It's expanding with more countries like Iran and Saudi Arabia set to join in the form of BRICS Plus in 2024. Now, this move threatens to further weaken NATO's influence on the global stage. However, the Ukraine crisis may have become a turning point. The war in Ukraine has arguably provoked the most profound change in the world order since World War II. On one side are liberal democracies, knitted together by the US-led alliance system. On the other are Russia and China, an autocratic bloc stretching from Eastern Europe to the Western Pacific. So what's the connection between Russia, Ukraine, and this global power struggle? In the grand scheme of things, destroying Russia could be a stepping stone to dismantling BRICS. To understand the dynamics, let's rewind to a time when Russia was an Eastern powerhouse, mirroring the United States' might in the West. Russia's influence extended far beyond its borders, primarily through its control of energy resources that flowed into Europe. Russia was never content with being a regional player. It constantly jostled for influence, often putting it in direct competition with the United States, the reigning superpower. Russia's strategic relationships with India and China further bolstered the emerging power of BRICS. Through military, monetary, and economic ties, this alliance began to pose a serious challenge to the established world order. Now, this isn't speculation. The 6 new BRICS entrants, starting from January 2024, are Argentina, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. This expansion underlines BRICS' ambition to challenge the international order dominated by Western powers by rallying countries from what is termed the Global South, emerging and developing nations. Now it's clear as day that BRICS is choosing each new partner strategically to advance their goals. Saudi Arabia and the UAE are both oil-rich nations. They can offer substantial financial strength, potentially fortifying the consortium's developmental funding initiatives for other developing countries. Egypt and Ethiopia each boast populations that surpass 100 million. This can enhance the group's demographic heft. Argentina's inclusion has been particularly championed by its neighboring BRICS member Brazil. Meanwhile, the induction of Iran, a nation persistently at odds with the West over nuclear developments, is a noteworthy move. The enlarged group will make up nearly a third of the global economy, 46% of the world's population, nearly 40% of the world's proven oil reserves, 50% of gas reserves, vast economic and financial clout, and armed forces numbering over 5 million. Today, China and Russia form a bipolar constellation of forces that are propelling BRICS toward world dominance. Their collective might in terms of military capabilities, monetary influence, and economic prowess has sent shockwaves across the global stage. Now consider this. Winning the war in Ukraine holds the promise of weakening Russia's position, and by extension, defeating BRICS' standing on the global stage. And friends, that precisely might be NATO's endgame. The human toll of war is immeasurable, but from the chaos comes some financial benefactors. Among them are the United States and various European Union countries. Now, if you follow the money, you'll see that NATO and its allies are playing a parallel game. In the weeks after Russia's invasion, the market capitalization of Raytheon Technologies, a defense contractor in the U.S., shot up to $155 billion from $128 billion at the start of that year. Lockheed Martin, another defense contractor, started 2022 worth $98 billion. By the end of that year, it had reached $127 billion, its highest since records show. Northrop Grumman started the year at $61 billion and ended at $84 billion. Defense contractors in the U.S. have been raking in colossal profits from the conflict. Skyrocketing demand for weaponry and military equipment has transformed the war into a lucrative venture. European companies are also profiting. Germany, whose military spending is the highest of all EU states, has had one of its arms manufacturers, Rheinmetall, record their highest earnings ever, with its CEO heralding a new era for the company. It saw profits jump by 27% and shares rise 55% in 1 year. But it doesn't stop there. The war has had a profound impact on oil prices, sending them soaring. Both traders and suppliers have been making a fortune selling cheap U.S. natural gas to the European continent at eye-watering markups, thanks to the almost total loss of Russian supplies. Quoting industry sources, market insiders reported that a single shipment worth $60 million on one side of the Atlantic at the end of summer 2022 could fetch roughly $275 million once it reached Europe. ExxonMobil, for example, reported a whopping $55.7 billion profit last year, the highest in its history, even beating the previous $45 billion in 2008, when a barrel of oil almost hit $150. A year before the Russian invasion, the U.S. was sending only 20% of its natural gas exports to Europe. Now, it's about 60%. While prices have stabilized since the start of 2023, this has made it even easier for the U.S. to justify itself as a new key energy supplier, as the markups no longer look so outrageous. Let's not forget the strategic importance of Ukraine in the grand scheme of things. It could hold the key to energy security for the European Union. Controlling Ukraine means controlling vital energy routes. At the Vilnius summit in July, NATO said that it would invite Ukraine to become a member when allies agree and conditions are met. It also said that Ukraine could skip a step in the entry process called the Membership Action Plan. However, NATO has not set out a time frame for Ukraine's entry. While countries including Poland and others in Eastern Europe favor giving Ukraine a roadmap toward membership, the United States, Germany, and France have been reluctant. Is it just a coincidence that those that are most reluctant to allow Ukraine a NATO membership are also the countries that have also benefited most from the war? Well, if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to our channel. We have a lot of exciting content coming up, so don't be a stranger.